talking about the topic of wellness travel. Wanted to just briefly introduce you here. Um, Jen heads the wellness segment of WeTravel, a payment and registration platform for multi-day travel. In the wellness space, WeTravel provides the technology to support domestic and international retreats, immersions, trainings, and similar offerings. Jen is also responsible for strategic development, which includes sales and marketing strategy, branding, community building, and project management. And she leads a team that creates and distributes educational content, manages partnerships, interacts with the media, and organizes online and live events. And we're so honored to have you here, Jen. We wanted to start with the first question. Which parts of the travel market do you think will be the first to reopen?
Great question, top of everybody's minds right now, especially mine. So we actually did a study back in the spring, kind of around the April-May time frame, towards the beginning of the pandemic. And so that was 500 or more surveys from travel-oriented businesses all across the world. And then of that 500 plus, 130 or so were from wellness travel providers and retreat organizer clients of ours. And even at that really early stage in the pandemic, it was really cool and inspiring to see that the wellness-oriented respondents, kind of relative to the group overall, they seem to be much more resilient and creative, for example, quickly pivoting to doing stuff online and putting out a lot of really interesting content to their audiences. And they were also, secondly, a lot more optimistic about kind of the timing of the recovery and the strength of the industry's rebound overall. So fast forward to now, excuse me, what I've been seeing and hearing lately is that sort of as the survey predicted even back then, wellness travel is coming back on the early end of things. And I think that's a reflection of a few different factors, but primarily that probably a lot of us have felt the economic and emotional toll of coronavirus on ourselves, our schedules, our kind of daily professional and personal lives, our communities, and people are in this place where their equilibrium is off. And I think travel is really something that's going to help rebuild our wellness and reset our equilibrium. And that's just going to appeal to a lot of people after the several months that we've been through. So it's probably broader than just retreat offerings, but I think that's a really important part of the picture. I think generally it'll be about curated niche travel experiences that speak to our sense of kind of adventure and wanderlust after we've been confined for so long. And it's about travel that offers something more than just beautiful memories. Those are important too, of course, but people are going to be looking for experiences that are really life-changing. So I think a lot to look forward to, even though we're on the early end of things.
Well, that's really hopeful. That's very positive. And what kinds of things do you think will be different in wellness travel as we forward to 2021?
So I think there's going to be a lot that's different, but I think probably one of the biggest things is going to be a renewed emphasis on sustainability in the travel space. So a big part of that is environmental for sure. For example, like when we travel, making sure that we're thinking about our carbon emissions, that we're minimizing kind of depletion of natural resources locally. And that's so important. And actually one of the reasons that I really admire Cork Yoga and your business and your brand so much. So not to diminish that at all. But I think alongside these ecological considerations, which are super important, sustainability is probably a little bit broader. There's social, cultural, and economic dimensions to it as well. So it's making sure that as either travel planners or travelers, we're approaching relationships with others by being respectful and inclusive of all, that when we're entering local communities, that we're mindful of residents' quality of life and well-being, that our dollars or euros or pounds or whatever it might be are being
Mhm.
funneled to businesses and local authorities, governments that are kind of promoting social justice, and kind of addressing
Mhm.
humanitarian concerns. And I think all this just sort of goes back to the fact that at the end of the day, travel is about enriching our lives, but for it to be sustainable, it needs to fairly enrich the communities that we're encountering as travelers.
Mhm.
And so if it does this, I think it not only makes us feel, good that we're that we're doing something good, but it makes our experience more meaningful, and it means that those are going to be experiences that future generations can share in as well.
Absolutely. Do you see any other ways we can expect things to change, especially during the early part of the recovery?
Yeah, definitely. I think people are going to be a little bit more value conscious than they were before COVID. So
Mhm.
in part, that's a reflection of kind of financial realities, given that a lot of people have seen their incomes go down, their 401ks
Mhm.
go down. But it's not just about the ticket price of whatever travel experience you're talking about. It's kind
Yeah.
of about, and I know, at times we're possibly all guilty of this. Like if you're pressed for time when you're planning a trip, you might, quickly select your destination and sort of hit the spots that are most known. And, you can end up with,
Mhm.
if you're not careful, you can end up with a little bit of a cookie cutter experience or itinerary.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, so people really, really thinking about their options carefully, doing their homework on small details, things
Mhm.
like that. For that reason, I think dollar for dollar, people are gonna seek out really niche, kind of differentiated travel experiences. And they're gonna look towards destinations and travel partners and providers that can support that.
Mhm.
Um, and then also, kind of for a while, especially in the short term, I think people are going to be a little more cautious about getting on long haul flights or being part of a big group. But I also think that's going to create an interesting tension, because it's basically in traveling to places that are far away from our homes, that are culturally and visually really, really different,
Yeah.
that we find that kind of like real escape and transformation.
Yeah.
And it's also our connection with others that we've really, I mean, a lot of us, myself speaking out of my own experience, that's what I've really missed
Mhm.
um, during these many months of being mostly isolated here in California.
Absolutely.
So I think, yeah, it's that connection with others has been limited when we're in lockdown. So the idea of traveling solo or as a couple, if you've been locked up with your partner or spouse for months, is maybe not going to be quite as exciting as joining other like-minded people. So,
Mhm.
I don't have the answer in terms of how that's actually going to pan out, and how these somewhat conflicting factors are going to, how it's basically what it's going to look like. But I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to watch over the next year in 2021.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask, how do you decide when you feel ready as responsible travel planners or travelers in a group? What should we consider before traveling in light of everything that's going on?
Yeah, I think responsible travel planners and also just individual travelers need to
Mm.
be sensitive and mindful of kind of the new reality. We talk about this in travel a lot, like what is our new normal?
Yeah.
So right now, it might mean that you're starting out with travel that's closer to home, or that's solo or limited to kind of your couple or your family. And then but I think as we look towards the middle of next year and certainly beyond, I think we're going to start to see things definitely shift. Kind of as I alluded to earlier, we've got these conflicting dynamics going on.
Mhm.
So I think as that shift happens, it's going to be really important to select a destination and local vendors that give you confidence. So
Mhm.
whoever's hosting you, ask them a lot of questions. So that could be, if you're going on retreat, your retreat center, your hotel or rental, wherever
Mhm.
you're staying, they should be able to tell you things about kind of changes to their hygiene and sanitation policies, their staff, if they're doing COVID screening, or if they've given staff any new training. exactly how kind of meal and dining options have changed, and if they have any rules on their property in terms of social distancing or mask wearing in the communal spaces. And
Mhm.
then just super importantly and basic, I might have mentioned this first, basically what on the property, and this is something to check in periodically between when you make your reservation, when you show up, just exactly up to date on what's totally open, what's maybe partially open with some restrictions, and what's full on shut down. Because you want to be prepared, obviously, when you arrive, that you know that stuff.
Absolutely.
And then just from like a practical perspective, I think you want to make sure that you're super clear on cancellation policies. So
Mhm.
no, maybe you have to put down something at the time of booking, and then something is due later or in installments, especially if you're a retreat group, that's really common. So just make sure you know kind of what happens to your deposit. Is it fully refundable, partially refundable? If
Mhm.
it's refundable, is that in the form of a credit for a future stay, or is it a reversal of the transaction so you get the money back in cash? And then sort of like what's the timeline for cancellation? What are the different penalties if the case may be along the way? That's just really important, like reading the fine print.
Yeah.
Always has been important, but just I think it's a little more heightened importance at the moment. And I think
Mhm.
the other big thing is travel insurance. Europeans have tended, our company's based in San Francisco and Amsterdam, so I have a lot of European colleagues and a lot of American colleagues. And
Mhm.
historically, I can say that the Europeans were always buying travel insurance much more frequently than American travelers were. I think it's just cultural. But I think people now globally are seeing kind of the value of having that, extra health and safety net to make sure that you're protected in terms of cancellation, in terms of if something goes wrong. And so a lot is changing in the travel insurance world and in terms of like standard policies right now. So I
Mhm.
won't go into the weeds on exactly how that's playing out, but I think it's just important to be mindful to consider, or if you're a retreat leader, maybe to require that your group has travel insurance.
Yeah.
And also, as the purchaser, whether you're doing that on behalf of a group or for yourself individually, really read the
Mhm.
fine print. Maybe, take the time to get on the phone with somebody who's an agent so you can just clarify any small details that you're not sure about, because these policies can be dense. And if you're like me, sometimes you don't read all of the fine print of a contract as carefully as maybe you should. So this is definitely not the time for that. It's time to make sure you do all your homework there. And then one last thought I had is just in the spirit of making sure that you feel ready and you feel confident. A great idea is to kind of keep tabs on local sources on the ground
Mhm.
wherever you're going. So that could be if it could be like a local municipality's website. It could be your hotel or retreat center. If you're going with a group on retreat, it could be your retreat leader who's doing all this planning and has amazing destination knowledge, but just so that you're staying in contact and keeping a pulse on kind of what maybe is changing in destination. So this will just mean that you have a lot more peace of mind, you feel ready, you feel confident, you've packed the right stuff, layers if you
Mhm.
need to be outside, for example, right sanitation supplies in terms of what's going to be included and not. And you'll just, you'll depart kind of feeling like you know what to expect and feeling, I think, a little less anxiety and a little more confidence as a result.
Absolutely. Confidence is key, right?
Yes.
What destinations do you see as being particularly attractive in 2021?
Yeah, so I think it kind of depends where in the world you are. Kind of as we touched on before, people are
Yeah.
probably going to be sticking closer to home, for immediate term travel.
Mhm.
As that starts to become more and more people are traveling domestically. But I think it's also the reason I said it's a tough one to answer is because it really means different things based on where you are. If
Yeah.
you're in the US, we do have a lot to explore domestically, which is awesome. But we've been a little bit more closed down than Europe, for example, who lots of Europe throughout the latter part of the summer and into the present has been pretty open to international travel, at least within certain pods of countries. And Europe's a little bit smaller, so you kind of do have to be able to move around to get somewhere different to where you live.
Mhm.
But I think both now and into the future, we're going to see kind of the beauty of the natural world drive people's destination selections even more so than it has in the past.
Mhm.
So I think really dense population centers are going to continue to be problematic, and probably less of a draw as a result. Um, so in the US, I can think there's been a big resurgence in wide open states, more remote states like Alaska and Montana that have, truly beautiful natural features. And then in Europe, I've heard people kind of touting the Faroe Islands up in the North Atlantic, and also the Azores out to the west of
Yeah.
Portugal. So I think people are going to gravitate towards places that aren't they're not total transportation headaches.
Mhm.
They have reliable infrastructure. They have, decent healthcare systems. They got lower than
Mhm.
average population densities, and sort of to date have demonstrated pretty responsible and effective public health during COVID.
Mhm.
And finally, as we touched on, places that really celebrate and protect the natural beauty of the destination. So without calling out too many specific names, hopefully that gives people a flavor for the kinds of destinations that I think probably will be a draw next year.
Definitely, definitely. That's so key right there to be able to know where to go. Thank you so much, Jen, for all of this amazing information and what we have to look forward to at the same time. And so, just in conclusion, where can those of us who are planning travel find the additional resources that
Yeah,
we need?
yeah. I think it kind of depends, maybe who you are. I don't know all who's out there, but if you are in the wellness industry or particularly interested in retreats as somebody who might be leading or going on them, we have we
Mhm.
have a Facebook group for people who are in the industry that's called the Retreat Leader Hub. And that's a community for information sharing and getting recommendations, connecting with other people that work in the wellness industry. And we've got a blog on our website at wetravel.com/stories. It's got a ton of educational resources, which we also tend to share in that Facebook group I mentioned, the Retreat
Mhm.
Leader Hub, and also in our Instagram account, which is wetravel.to is our handle. And then if you are more on the traveler side of things, not in the industry, our Instagram channel is actually a good place for you to check out as well. We share wellness tips every Wednesday. So there's a lot of content from among our client base, people who are in the wellness travel space. So there's stuff like short yoga sequences, guided meditations, nutrition and Ayurveda tips. And it also our blog that I mentioned before, wetravel.com/stories. There's also a travel tips and kind of destination spotlight section. So if you
Mhm.
are, interested in traveling soon or just kind of want to travel vicariously at the moment, those are all, both the blog and the Instagram account might be fun places for you to scope out as well.
Thank you so much, Jen. Really appreciate it. You and your team have provided amazing resources for all of us.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me to join today, Christine. I really
Uh,
appreciate it. Thank
it's
you.
been a pleasure, and hopefully one day we can meet up in Portugal.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.